The paradox of honesty. We are told from childhood that honesty is the foundation of every strong relationship, that trust is built upon truth and truth alone. Parents teach it as a moral commandment. Teachers enforce it as a rule of virtue. Philosophers defend it as a principle of reason. We imagine honesty as a light, something pure, cleansing, and absolute. But what happens when the light is too bright, when it reveals not only the noble truths we wish to hear, but the darker ones that lie beneath? Consider a spouse who admits every fleeting attraction to someone else, a leader who exposes every weakness, every insecurity, every doubt to their people, a friend who confesses not only their loyalty, but every unkind thought they have ever held about you. At first glance, such honesty seems courageous, even admirable. Yet more often than not, it does not bring us closer. It drives us apart. The truth, spoken without restraint, becomes corrosive. What was meant to heal begins to wound. What was meant to bond begins to fracture. And soon we discover that the very thing we believed was the key to trust may also be the seed of its destruction. The Russian novelist Dostoevsky once wrote that man cannot bear too much reality. Nietzsche went further, warning that truths are illusions which we have forgotten are illusions. Both understood what most of us quietly recognize but rarely admit. Complete honesty, stripped of compassion, stripped of discretion, can be unbearable, and so we face a paradox. Honesty is a virtue we revere, yet too much of it can unravel the very fabric of our relationships. If trust demands truth, but truth destroys trust, what then sustains human connection? This is not just a question for couples or friendships. It is a question for entire civilizations. Families, communities, even nations are built not on pure reality, but on carefully constructed illusions, on what is said, and just as often, on what is left unsaid. In this exploration, we will unravel the paradox of honesty, why it can never be absolute, why too much of it destroys every relationship, and why perhaps, beneath the surface, it was never truth that bound us together in the first place. The myth of pure honesty in human history. Across centuries, human civilization has praised honesty as a moral cornerstone. Yet history reveals a truth that is far more unsettling. Honesty has never been the full foundation of any society. Instead, civilizations are built upon carefully crafted illusions, partial truths, and at times deliberate deception. Plato, in the Republic, introduced the concept of the noble lie, a deliberate myth told by rulers to preserve harmony among the people. He understood that if every citizen knew every brutal truth about power, inequality, or fate, society would collapse into chaos. The illusion of fairness was not a flaw, it was a necessity. Machiavelli, centuries later, echoed this reality. A ruler who revealed every weakness, every hidden fear, every moral uncertainty would not be respected. They would be devoured. Political power, he argued, depended less on pure honesty and more on appearances, half-truths, and strategic concealment. To survive, leaders needed to project confidence even when doubt consumed them. Even religions, which often preach the sacredness of truth, have relied on mystery and concealment. Sacred texts were once accessible only to priests or scholars, with divine knowledge withheld from the masses. Why? Because too much truth too soon was believed to be destructive. Unfiltered honesty about existence, mortality, or the meaninglessness of life might have paralyzed entire populations. And so, myth was offered instead of pure fact, a comforting illusion in place of unbearable honesty. The same pattern repeats through history. During wars, leaders censor bad news to maintain morale. During economic crises, governments distort numbers to prevent panic. Even in families, parents soften the truth about death or suffering, not out of cruelty, but protection. These examples reveal something profound. Honesty has always been edited. Humanity has never lived on raw truth, but on a curated version of it. Societies, like individuals, can only withstand so much reality. The myth of pure honesty, the belief that a world of unfiltered truth would lead to enlightenment, has never existed. From Plato to the Cold War, leaders and cultures alike have recognized the same paradox. Illusions are not the enemy of civilization. They are the glue that holds it together. The psychology of brutal honesty. We often claim to value honesty above all else. We tell our partners, our friends, our leaders, just tell me the truth. Yet beneath this demand lies a quiet contradiction. Because while we crave honesty in theory, in practice, the full weight of it is often unbearable. Psychology has long shown us why. Sigmund Freud observed that the human mind is not a vessel designed for pure truth. It is a fragile structure, defended by layers of repression, denial, and rationalization. These mechanisms are not weaknesses, they are shields, protecting us from realities too painful to confront. If every hidden thought, every suppressed desire, every raw truth of our condition were laid bare, the psyche would shatter. Carl Jung expanded this with his idea of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we bury because they are too shameful or dangerous to reveal. When someone forces absolute honesty upon us, they drag fragments of this shadow into the open. Suddenly, the friend we trusted confesses envy. The partner we love admits to fantasies that betray us. The leader we admire reveals crippling fear. And once exposed, these truths cannot be unseen. The problem is not that honesty reveals facts, but that it dismantles illusions we depend on for stability. Relationships survive not on knowing everything, but on knowing enough to trust. Too much honesty floods the system, overwhelming the fragile scaffolding that holds bonds together. Consider the thought experiment of a child asking about death. If the parent answers with brutal honesty, "Yes, you will die, and everyone you love will vanish, and the universe will not care," the truth is accurate, but it is also destructive. It overwhelms the child with a reality they are not equipped to process. A softer, partial truth preserves their innocence until they are ready. The same principle applies in adulthood. Radical honesty bypasses the natural filters our minds rely on to survive social life. By stripping away discretion, tact, and timing, it delivers truth in its most corrosive form. This is why we may admire honesty in theory, but recoil from it in practice. Deep down, we recognize what philosophers like Nietzsche warned: the unvarnished truth is rarely liberating. More often, it is unbearable. The fragile architecture of relationships. Every human relationship is, in a sense, an intricate construction. On the surface, we imagine them to be built from the solid bricks of truth and trust. But if we look closer, we see that beneath the bricks lies something far more delicate: scaffolding made of restraint, silence, and carefully chosen omissions. Romantic relationships, for instance, rarely survive on unfiltered honesty. Love often requires a softening of perception, a willingness to overlook flaws and exaggerate virtues. Lovers know, at least unconsciously, that the magic of intimacy depends not only on what is revealed, but on what is concealed. The small lie of saying, "You're the only one I've ever wanted," carries more power than the brutal honesty of confessing every passing desire. The illusion may not be literally true, but it sustains the emotional reality of love. Friendships work the same way. Few friendships could withstand the constant sharing of every annoyance, every criticism, every moment of envy. Instead, they survive on discretion, on what is left unsaid. We forgive small slights not by confronting them with radical honesty, but by letting them slip into silence, maintaining the illusion that the bond is stronger than our frustrations. Even within families, tact often replaces transparency. A parent hides financial struggles to protect a child's sense of safety. A sibling conceals resentment to preserve peace. The architecture of family unity is held together not by relentless truth-telling, but by subtle negotiations of what can be spoken and what must remain hidden. The failure of radical honesty movements illustrates this principle vividly. Studies and experiments where couples are encouraged to voice every thought, every attraction, every irritation often end not in stronger bonds, but in collapse. When relationships are stripped of their protective illusions, they become brittle. Too much exposure erodes the trust it was meant to reinforce. This fragility is not a weakness of human connection, but its defining feature. Relationships are less like fortresses of truth and more like glass structures, transparent enough to allow light in, but so delicate that too much pressure shatters them. What sustains us, then, is not absolute honesty, but a balance between revelation and concealment. Too little honesty breeds suspicion. Too much and the very structure of intimacy begins to collapse. When truth shatters bonds, to see how destructive unrestrained honesty can be, we need only look at history, literature, and lived experiments. Again and again, truth has proven to be as dangerous as deception, sometimes even more so. Consider the world of intimate relationships. The writer George Orwell once reflected on the cruelty of complete truth in private life. In his essays, he noted that the impulse to confess every thought, every impulse, every passing judgment is less an act of love and more an act of violence. Imagine a husband admitting to his wife every fleeting attraction he feels for others. The honesty is pure, yet its effect is poison. What is said cannot be unsaid. What is revealed cannot be unseen. The truth, once spoken, leaves scars that no apology can erase. We see the same phenomenon in politics. Whistleblowers often embody the very principle of radical honesty, exposing corruption, secrecy, and lies, yet their reward is rarely gratitude. Instead, it is exile, betrayal, and destruction. Edward Snowden revealed the brutal truth about mass surveillance. Julian Assange revealed truths about war. Whatever one thinks of them, their honesty destabilized governments, fractured alliances, and painted targets on their backs. Too much truth, even when righteous, can dismantle the very structures that sustain power, and power does not forgive. Psychology offers controlled experiments of this same paradox. In the early 2000s, psychologists studied the practice of radical honesty, a movement that demanded people confess every thought and feeling, no matter how offensive or inconvenient. Couples who practiced this quickly discovered its flaw. Instead of fostering intimacy, it created resentment, paranoia, and emotional exhaustion. Relationships collapsed under the weight of total disclosure. The conclusion was clear. While honesty is necessary, complete transparency is corrosive. Even at the scale of entire societies, too much truth has proven catastrophic. During wars, when soldiers or civilians were given unfiltered reports of impending defeat, morale collapsed, desertion skyrocketed, and chaos spread. Leaders learned that to preserve unity, selective dishonesty, or at least partial concealment, was essential. The truth was not merely the truth, it was a weapon capable of dismantling collective will. These cases reveal a disturbing pattern. Honesty does not guarantee connection, justice, or progress. On the contrary, it often destabilizes the very bonds it seeks to purify. It turns lovers into enemies, friends into strangers, citizens into cynics. The problem, then, is not whether truth is good or bad. It is that truth, when unleashed without filter or restraint, is too powerful to be contained. It burns through the fragile fabric of human connection, leaving only ashes behind. Modern culture and the cult of transparency. If history shows us that complete honesty can destabilize relationships and societies, then modern culture represents a dangerous experiment. The belief that radical transparency is a virtue. In the age of social media, therapy language, and authenticity culture, the illusion is that the more we reveal, the freer and happier we will become. But in reality, this cult of transparency often leads to disillusionment, destruction, and isolation. Online life thrives on confession. Platforms reward vulnerability, the public airing of traumas, secrets, and flaws. The phrase, "Be your authentic self," has become a mantra. But in practice, authenticity without boundaries quickly morphs into oversharing. Every unfiltered thought, every private struggle, every controversial opinion becomes content, and once it is released into the public domain, it is no longer under the speaker's control. The honesty that was meant to liberate instead becomes ammunition for judgment, gossip, or cancellation. Cancel culture itself is an extension of this paradox. In the name of transparency and accountability, people are punished for words, thoughts, or admissions that might have been brutally honest but socially unforgivable. Careers collapse under the weight of past tweets, leaked confessions, or revealed flaws. The demand for complete honesty from public figures does not strengthen our trust in them. It erodes it. Once the mystique of leadership, artistry, or influence is stripped away by raw transparency, All that is left is the fragile, flawed human being we can no longer idealize. Even in personal life, the modern glorification of radical openness corrodes intimacy. Couples encouraged to communicate everything often find themselves suffocating under constant confession. Friendships fracture when every irritation is voiced instead of quietly forgiven. What we call authenticity too often becomes cruelty disguised as virtue. Ironically, the more we reveal, the less trust we inspire. True confidence and charisma often come not from broadcasting every thought, but from mystery, from restraint, discretion, and selective silence. Leaders who project certainty maintain authority. Those who confess every doubt lose it. Partners who preserve a degree of mystery sustain attraction. Those who expose every inner conflict often destroy it. The modern cult of transparency mistakes raw exposure for genuine connection. It confuses disclosure with intimacy, but the truth is harsher. The more we dismantle the protective illusions around us, the more fragile and unstable our bonds become. And in the process, we risk discovering that it is not honesty that sustains human connection, but the delicate art of concealment, the necessary illusions, why we need lies. If too much honesty destroys every relationship, then the uncomfortable truth is this: we survive not because of pure reality, but because of illusions, lies, half-truths, omissions. These are not mere flaws in human interaction, but the very scaffolding that keeps our lives intact. Friedrich Nietzsche understood this when he declared that humans do not want truth, but illusions. For Nietzsche, life without comforting illusions would be unbearable. A direct encounter with reality would overwhelm us. In his words, truths are merely illusions we have forgotten are illusions. What we call reality is already softened, edited, and distorted to make existence tolerable. Psychology confirms this. The placebo effect demonstrates that even a known lie can heal. A sugar pill, given in the right context, can alleviate pain or anxiety, not because it contains medicine, but because it sustains the illusion of care. The mind, it turns out, does not require absolute truth to function. It requires belief. Relationships function the same way. A partner says, "You're the most beautiful person in the world to me." Taken literally, the statement is false, but its value lies not in factual honesty, but in the illusion it creates, the feeling of being cherished, of being singular. Parents tell their children, "Everything will be okay." It may not always be true, but the lie provides safety, strength, and hope in moments when brutal honesty would only paralyze. Even at the level of nations, illusions bind societies together. National myths, shared histories, even collective symbols. Many are distortions or exaggerations, yet without them, the sense of unity collapses. A people without a myth is a people without cohesion. The philosopher Ernest Becker argued in The Denial of Death that human beings live within vital lies, stories that protect us from the terror of our mortality. To strip them away in the name of pure honesty would not enlighten us, it would crush us. And so, the lies we tell are not betrayals of truth, but acts of preservation. They are the gentle fictions that protect us from unbearable realities, the illusions that allow love to endure, and the stories that make society possible. Section 8. Conclusion. The dangerous balance. We return now to the paradox with which we began. If honesty is the foundation of trust, why does complete honesty so often destroy it? The answer, as history, psychology, and experience reveal, is that honesty is not an absolute good. It is a force, and like fire, it must be controlled. Too little honesty breeds suspicion, betrayal, and decay. Too much burns through the fragile fabric of intimacy, loyalty, and stability. Every relationship, whether between lovers, friends, families, or entire nations, exists on this precarious balance. It is not sustained by pure truth, nor by pure falsehood, but by the careful dance between revelation and concealment, between what must be spoken and what must remain unspoken. This is not cynicism, but realism. To love another person is not to know every corner of their soul, but to accept the version of themselves they choose to share. To lead is not to expose every weakness, but to embody the strength others need to see. To be a friend is not to voice every resentment, but to protect the bond by letting silence absorb some of our darker impulses. Perhaps we do not truly love people as they are, in their entirety. Perhaps we love the illusions we construct about them, the softened truths, the flattering lies, the mysteries we never fully solve. And perhaps this is not a flaw, but the essence of human connection. The danger comes not from dishonesty alone, but from forgetting that truth is a double-edged sword. Wielded with care, it builds trust. Wielded recklessly, it destroys it. The wisdom lies not in radical honesty, nor in total concealment, but in knowing which truths must be revealed and which must be left in the shadows. So, the next time we demand honesty at any cost, we might pause to ask ourselves, do we truly want the full truth, or do we only want enough of it to keep our illusions alive? Because in the end, it is not honesty that sustains our relationships. It is the fragile, dangerous, and necessary balance between truth and illusion